You're listening to the A Bit From Within podcast with Felicia Marty. It is okay for us just to really evaluate what are the biggest priorities right now, who matters, what matters, and allowing ourselves to consciously choose that and to also maybe plan for what we need next. Hello there, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in to a new episode of the A Bit From Within podcast. I'm Felicia, and I'm sitting here by myself today, just trying to take a moment to really just root down, ground myself. This past week has been an interesting one for sure. And through it all, I just feel like I found myself a little bit going through the motions, and there's a lot of stuff up in my world right now, which I'll get into here in a little bit in the podcast. But I've been thinking about just allowing myself to be where I am without judgment. And you guys have heard, if you've been listening for a while, I come back to this quite often. I think mostly because I'm very judgmental. Just put it very simply, I feel like I always find myself judging myself for where I'm at, how I'm showing up, what I'm doing well, what I'm not doing good enough, mostly that one. And this week has been nothing what I expected, nothing of what I anticipated, and not in any big life-altering ways at all, just the little things that I felt like I was really having a good grip on have pretty much all gone to the wayside. And I find myself kind of just looking around like, oh, I wish I would have had time to do this, or I wish I would have done that, or I should have done this. There's been a lot of shoulds going through my head. And I'm trying to actively stop that and remember that I can't do everything, that I am where I am, that the stuff that is getting done is what I'm supposed to be working on, and let that be enough. So I guess that is a tiny peek into what is going to come later in today's episode as I dive more into this. But first I thought, let's take a pause and talk about astrology and where the moon is at this week and where the moon was just at and what's happening with all of the planets in the sky. You guys know that I love astrology, and my mom and I were just talking about this because we both love talking about astrology. And I was telling her, I'm like, I'm a little bit more preoccupied by learning astrology through the natal chart reading and really figuring out what the natal chart placements mean for me specifically. And I've had a chance to do quite a few astrological readings for people. And it has been amazing to really dive into what makes a person, what influences a person, and also to hear their reactions to where certain placements are in their natal chart and what it means for them. And for me, actually, I'll never forget the moment that I really felt that click kind of like inside of me. I was listening to a very wonderful astrologer. I've taken a couple of her courses in astrology, and she was describing Virgo rising, which I'm a Virgo rising, and she was talking about how Virgo risings can be extremely critical or come across as very judgmental. And I mean, there's many more wonderful qualities to Virgo rising, but I remember thinking like, oh, like maybe that's part of why I am how I am, because that is definitely something that I have to own as part of my personality, but something that I also hold a lot of shame around, especially because the way that we talk about being judgmental it always has a negative connotation to it. And it's something that as an adult, my sister actually has constantly called me out for when I'm being judgmental, whether I'm judging her or the movie that we're watching or the characters in the TV show or the way that somebody's doing something. It's like I always have this running thought in my head of like how somebody should be doing something. And of course, astrology is not the only way that a person is how they are. But for me, I was like, this is very true for me. This is something that I don't feel like I was taught. It's not like my parents are like that or anything, although my mother is a Virgo too, so a sun sign Virgo. actually, my mom and I, we have kind of like opposites. So like I'm a Cancer with Virgo rising and she's a Virgo with Cancer rising. So there's like a similarity there. Um, but anyway, getting back on track, I really remember being like this sense of deep permission and just feeling like, okay, like it doesn't mean that I can run around with like a judgment license. Obviously, it's something that I am always striving to work on or be consciously aware of so that I can keep my thoughts to myself and not be spewing them out at other people all the time. Something I've gotten a lot better at the more aware I've become of this part of me. But it actually also helped soften that part of me because it kind of helped me realize I'm like, okay, this part of me, this Virgo rising part of me is very analytical. I'm always trying to assess a situation. I'm always trying to perfect it. And that part of me actually allows me to plan a great trip and run a great business and be a great problem solver and be a good friend in a situation where problems need to be solved. It's very earthy. It's very practical. It allows me to organize a closet really well or pack up a car when we're, road tripping or whatever. And I that judgment kind of comes from the same need to want things to be great and that kind of perfectionist. And then of course there's, the light side of it and there's the dark side of it. And so it's okay for both to exist, and it's okay to kind of admit that and give yourself that permission. At least that's what it felt like for me. And I think there's such a magic to that. But anyway, all of that is just to say that I've been a little bit more rooted into that lately, as opposed to really trying to figure out all of the things that are happening in the sky right now. I've mentioned a couple of things that have been happening this summer, mostly with the Mercury retrograde. I mean, there's been plenty of other activity happening, but it's all been a little bit too much for me to dive into with everything else I've had on my plate. So I will say that we have just kind of come out of eclipse season. So eclipse is kind of finished for at least 5-6 months or so. And now it kind of feels like with this new moon that just happened last Friday, that there's this really big kind of like unveiling, or like the gates rising up so that we can actually put some of our intention and intention out into the universe and start to really make some forward progress. So we are still in this period right now. So if you're listening to this on Tuesday or even a little bit later in the week, we are still in that new moon phase. And you guys might know that by now that I am a very big advocate of like, you don't have to just use the day or two around the phase of the moon in order to do what you need to do or use that forward momentum. I like to think of the time from the new moon until the full moon as like a clock moving from like 6 o'clock up to noon. So like that kind of left side of the clock, that upward journey. And what's kind of nice about that is like it is a little bit of hard work, but you know where you're going. You know where you're headed. You know how to pace yourself. And you maybe can't see your progress, but as you start to round, you're starting to really get that momentum. And then once we get up to the full moon, it's like the top of the circle or the top of the clock is like this place of illumination and this place of culmination. What you've worked for has maybe been at this peak, or you're getting a lot of enlightenment, or you're feeling just a ton of energy, or maybe you're feeling ready to release a ton of what you've been working through to gain. And of course, that following 2 weeks is a little bit more of the downward moving back towards 6 o'clock, which you could think everything can just happen very quickly. It feels a little bit less like you're in control of it because it's kind of happening with gravity. In my mind is kind of how it feels. Is just a little bit more of a need to slow down, to decompress, to realize you're kind of winding in towards the darkness. And there's a lot of retreat and surrender and giving that needs to be done. So, and if you like this and want more thoughts on this, definitely check out both my new moon and my full moon guide that is on my website. It is a standalone guide that doesn't talk specifically like about what's happening from month to month. It can be used in any month. Each of them has, I believe, 4 rituals that can be used during each moon phase, and then a lot more of a description of like what's happening during the moon phase, how you can use the energy of each of those moon phases for your well-being. And I am definitely not a person that's like believes in black and white, like only set your intentions during this time, only manifest during this time, or only do this. We all are doing the best that we can. We all have different things going on in our lives at different times. And so I definitely believe there's a gray area. And so those guides definitely will hold you through any kind of new moon or full moon phase and just give you some fun insight and hopefully some inspiration. So you can get those on my website. You can do just the new moon or just the full moon, or you can buy the kit, which also has the moon tracker, which we are halfway through the year. But it's still, if you don't track what's been happening for you in the moon phases and you're interested in doing that, it is such a cool thing to be able to look back on and see like, oh my gosh, like the 6 months ago when these same signs were happening, this same thing was coming up in my relationship, or, I'm just making that up, but you can start to look for patterns essentially, and it can be very, very powerful for your progress. So all of that being said, we just had our first new moon that wasn't kind of, with these eclipses and with all of this other kind of stuck energy, or this idea of like, don't move forward right now. And right now it's like those gates have been open and we're ready to move forward. And coming up this week, we're going to be kind of hitting that like 9 o'clock part of the clock. As far as like momentum goes, which is the first quarter moon. So when you look up in the sky, we'll have that quarter moon. And this is an interesting placement in astrology, because when we look at where the signs are in the zodiac, the moon, it changes every 2.5 days. So sun will be in Cancer, and on Friday, the moon will be in Libra. And that forms a square. Now, squares are known to be oppositions or challenges. They kind of are conflicting energy in some ways, because they're in different elements that usually conflict with each other. But also, what I think is interesting about squares is they often share the same modality. So essentially, in astrology, you have individual signs, and each sign can be one of 3 modalities. So either a cardinal, a fixed, or a mutable. And with Cancer and Libra, they're both cardinal signs. And cardinals are each of the zodiacs that start a season. So Capricorn, Libra, Cancer, and Aries. And each of those are a different element. So you've got 1 air, 1 fire, 1 earth, 1 water. And while they're all different because of the different elements, and also like each zodiac is a little bit different, they all have things in common. And those things in common kind of are those cardinal qualities. So wonderful leadership, kind of single-minded focus for excellence. There's a lot more things, but the conflicting part of that, I believe, is it's almost like they all want to be the one who's in charge. They all want to be the one who wants to take that leadership, that wants to take that initiative, and they want to go about doing it in different ways. So that's kind of where that conflict can be. You can imagine people that you're very similar to, that you bump, heads with. That's what the square energy can feel like. So, when that happens in the new moon cycle, you get halfway through this new moon cycle and you hit this challenge area, it kind of gives you insight into how you're going to rise up through the rest of your intentions. So there's always a point when we set our intentions where, we have to really reevaluate. Is this working for us? Is it moving how we expected it to? Where do we need to readjust? And sometimes those are very fine-tuning, tiny adjustments. Maybe they're adjustments within ourselves, within our own expectations. And sometimes they're big things that we need to readjust, like a totally new trajectory, or the whole thing falling apart, needing to be completely reconstructed. And there is space for all of that. And that is kind of what this first quarter moon can kind of symbolize for us, is us taking a moment to continue to push ourselves forward with this intentional and manifesting trajectory, but also be wise enough to look at how it's actually going and to make those adjustments. So that is it. That's the astro check-in. I definitely went on quite a bit more about astrology than I intended to, but again, working on just accepting what is. Hopefully, it was useful for you. Let's take a quick break and then we'll be right back. So, I'm excited to share a little bit more about the things that have been going on this week, and hopefully, even just sharing a bit from within will help me organize it all in my head a little bit better. The last week has been very strange because last Monday I dropped Dave off at the airport and he was gone this past week. And I don't know why, but I thought, I'm like, okay, with Dave gone, I am going to get so much stuff done. Like, I'm going to be able, I didn't like write a list down of everything I thought I'd accomplished, but I think in my mind, I thought I will organize the closets and I'm going to get like, I just sat down in here and I can tell you I've not touched this closet at all. And I've noticed that there's like, we have these shelves in the closet that are like low to the floor. And I just noticed like all of this dog hair along the back of the shelves because there's nothing on them. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have so much to do. Like I think maybe it was in my mind, like also how I was going to deal maybe with like some of the anxiety of him being gone, just like the routine changing. I thought I'm just going to be able to go on this cleaning spree and then everything will be how I want it to be because nobody will be touching it and moving things around or ruining it. And I thought, I'll be able to go to the pool, which has been such a fun thing this summer. And I'm going to spend time with Brad. And I think one part of my brain went there. The other part of my brain was like, I have so much work to get done. This is going to be great because I won't have to share the office this week and I'm going to be able to work really late into the night and I'm just going to get so much stuff done. And then there's the reality of the fact that like there is so much going on this week. So my sister is moving to Florida and she is the first person in our family to ever make a huge life change like that. And I'm so proud of her and also so excited for her and definitely really sad and working through some emotions of, what is that going to be like? I'm actually, to be honest, I haven't totally let myself go there. Like I felt it come up a few times, but mostly we've all just been kind of trying to rally around her. And I know that it's the best thing for her. It's going to be awesome. I feel like it's definitely a divine thing. But it's so, I also have this huge amount of compassion because I'm like, I can't even begin to wrap my mind around how stressful it would be to move across the country. She's done it all so fast. Like I think she's planned all of this within like the last 6 weeks and she's, has to ship her car and find an apartment and figure out how to get her cat there and deal with the airlines and figure out, suitcases and what to pack and what to get rid of and then moving out of her apartment. And I was thinking back to a year and a half or almost 2 years ago when we were in flux getting ready to move into our house. And I think back to what a stressful time that was for me, like probably one of the most stressful times of my life. And I wasn't even moving across the country. I was moving across town. And so I know we're all just trying to help her through it. And so yesterday I went to finish helping her with getting the rest of the stuff out of her apartment and we moved her. I'm definitely feeling it in my biceps today. My biceps are feeling much stronger than they were before. It probably didn't help that I had an 8-hour wedding on Saturday. And so kind of those two things back to back. I tell you what, shooting weddings is a total workout for sure. But anyway, so then I also had the job of taking all of her stuff and figuring out how to get it all to fit in her car with like also, like at least the company that she went through, they said like you have to pack everything below the window level. So we had to get really creative and figure out how to fit it all in there. And again, Virgo rising, or maybe it's just also how my brain works. I'm very strategic and I love puzzles. So for me, it was like just a puzzle of figuring out how to make everything fit and what made sense. So, of course, happy to help do all of that. And I'm just trying to be as present in the moment with her and also remember like this is the last time that she's going to live here. So we've been trying to spend some time together. And then, of course, I've had weddings and the business has just continued to stay super busy. So we're getting lots of inquiries and lots of people wanting to talk about their upcoming weddings and shooting lots of weddings and then delivering lots of weddings and talking with those people about their weddings. And so, needless to say, nothing has gotten done around the house. And it has been driving me crazy because I feel like I'm living in two different realities. I feel like there's the reality I have to be in, which is just getting the stuff that needs to be done. And then this whole alternate reality where I just wanted to be able to like be in this perfectly clean house with like the smell of candles burning and like, I don't know. In my mind, when I close my eyes and picture this is so funny. I'm literally picturing like the smell of the beach coming through, which is funny because I live in a landlocked state, definitely not near a beach. But I guess there's like this feeling of peace and calm that comes for me. And I feel like that's the reality that I want. And it is so far from the reality I'm living in. And for this past week, I've just been feeling like this tremendous amount of guilt almost because what am I trying to say? I feel like I should be able to have both or straddle both, or that if I had done something different in the beginning of, Dave being gone, that I could have flipped into that reality. And this morning I was thinking about this a little bit more intensely, and I think I just had to come to the conclusion that like some things aren't meant to be and it is okay. And maybe it is me that's not quite ready. There is so much change going on in my life. Like Dave being gone right now has been a huge change in our schedule, in our, our family life, the three of us, like Brad, me, and him, and the needs of our household are different when he's gone, and trying to maintain our relationship while he's off visiting with family, trying to figure out how to support him while he's on vacation, trying to not be a control freak about how he's moving through life and spending money and doing all of those things. Like I don't want to have any control over those things. Let me be clear. But I can't help but think about it because we've, budgeted and we're trying to make this trip happen. And we have a lot of other things going on this year that we're trying to balance. And so, not being able to be there to make sure he's okay. And I'm such a enabler in that way. I just want to do for people. And I'm glad that I'm not there to do that, honestly, because he is so capable and deserves, that's what I was telling him. I'm like, we all deserve that vacation that we just go on by ourselves. Like, yes, it is so much fun traveling together. Dave and I love to travel together. We had the best road trip. Whenever we go anywhere together, we always have the best time. And I'm sure we would be having a blast if I was able to be there, and I want to be there. But I was telling him, I'm like, there is something magical that happens when you travel by yourself. And about a year ago, I did a podcast about travels and traveling by yourself. And I really believe that there's something that happens for your soul when you're traveling by yourself. So I hope that he's finding that. I know while you're in it, sometimes you can't always see it, or it's not always sunshine and rainbows and butterflies. There's always ups and downs. But I hope that he's finding what he needs to. And that I hope he's ready to come home because I can't wait to see him very, very soon. So anyway, all of that is just to say, being, this idea of what I thought I was going to be experiencing this week versus how it's actually playing out is just another thing to surrender to. And it's also an opportunity for me to be a little bit more honest about how I'm checking in with myself, because I definitely have just readjusted my needs of taking care of myself for those of other people. And this is a little bit of a part two, because I feel like I did talk about this last week. And I think where I'm at right now is truly believing that there is a time and a place where you need to choose other people over yourself, or just prioritizing that some of those situations matter more. Like spending time with my sister and her feeling supported by me this week as she's getting ready to move and this huge thing is happening in her life. It's as a temporary thing. It's not like she needs this from me all the time. This is a temporary thing, and it is more important than me coming home and cleaning my closet, right? I can do this later. I can do this when Dave's back. I don't have to do it while he's gone. And I think that is true for so many of us when we are in the in-between, right? You guys have heard me talk about the in-between before, but we're there more often than we're not, right? It's like we are mostly always arriving somewhere or departing somewhere, or we're traveling to somewhere, not physically, but in our journey. And when we are in those places of transition, especially when it is very obvious that like the ground is shifting beneath us, it is okay for us just to really evaluate what are the biggest priorities right now, who matters, what matters, and allowing ourselves to consciously choose that, and to also maybe plan for what we need next. And that's the piece I definitely didn't have last week that I'm starting to feel this week is, okay, Felicia, like you didn't get the stuff that you wanted to get done that was going to make you feel peaceful, the parts that were going to make you feel whole and in control and satisfied and accomplished and relaxed. That's the piece that I'm missing. But I will get that. I need to plan for it. And there are a bunch more things that I have to get done first, and that is okay. Am I still taking care of myself in the interim with trying to eat good foods, trying to be in the moment, trying to do my mindfulness, trying to move my body? Yes, I am. I can continue to work on those little in-between spaces. I feel like I've been a lot better about drinking water this past week, but I have not gone to the grocery store and definitely need to do that. Probably been eating out a little bit too much this past weekend, but I also have to honor the fact that like I've been going through some stressful stuff too, and I'm managing it really well for how I've been feeling. And I've had a couple slip up as I had a couple moments this weekend mostly with my family where I was a little grouchy and came off a little harsh, which I can do from time to time. But I was, it was a really hot weekend and we're trying to move all this stuff and heat combined with fatigue and just logistics. It can be a little triggering for some of those old family dynamics. But we got through it. And even the wedding that I photographed on Saturday, I was so excited for this wedding because it was a downtown Denver wedding, a couple from last year who had to reschedule. But I was also very nervous because it was the biggest bridal party that I've ever shot. Before this, my biggest bridal party was 11 on each side, so like 24 people total with not including kids. This one was 17 people on each side. And I was really nervous about that because I, again, have that perfectionist inside of me. I want everything to go so excellent. And the more people you add to a group, the harder it is to execute a great photo. And also just in the middle of a wedding day, like to get people moving and get people where they need to be, the more people you add, the trickier that becomes. And so getting through the wedding on Saturday was not only an amazing accomplishment, but it went so much better than I could have thought going in. It's not that I expected it to be bad. I go in with like no expectations of it to be good or bad, just like standard. And then we just had so much fun. The couple was amazing. The party was amazing. Shooting the pictures downtown was amazing. The photographer that I worked with that night, Noelle, she's amazing. And we had so much fun together. And I left feeling like very satisfied, but also relieved because I was stressed going into that weekend for sure. So I guess, as I look through into the rest of the summer, I do feel like I should have expected in some ways, and maybe this is just how our lives are sometimes, that we are just juggling certain known stressors, whether that's like for me, like a certain wedding that I have on my schedule or a travel plan or a thing happening in relationships or changes in the family or whatever. There are certain known stressors we have coming up. And it is up to us on how we're going to manage ourselves and our lives around it. Sometimes we have to choose other people. Sometimes we have to choose ourselves. Sometimes we have to say, I cannot get through this if I am exhausting my energy through other people. I have to take care of myself. I need to go inward, or I need to set a boundary. Those things are 1,000% okay. But we also have to give ourselves credit for how we're moving through it all. And that is the biggest piece that I'm working on right now. And another way that I'm trying to work on that is by allowing myself to, even show up with the kind of content that I have. Like I've had so much guilt around not posting as much on Instagram, especially for A Bit From Within. And I've had those self-deprecating thoughts on like, am I just saying the same old stuff on the podcast? Am I going to be repetitive? Am I not worth, listening to? Am I not worth investing in? And I have just had to say to myself, like, you know what? That is not your place to decide about yet. You can't decide while you're in the middle of this stressful time, and when you're in the middle of your busy season. That's not the best time to make decisions about whether to keep going with something or not. You got to just let yourself be where you are and stop judging yourself so hard. At least that's what I'm telling myself right now. So, I'm just trying to embrace it all, allow myself to be where I am, to try to not have those judgmental thoughts about myself and others. And we'll see how that goes. We're going to do a card reading here in a moment to close today's episode. But I did want to share, if you're listening to this before Sunday the 18th, I am going to be doing another live yoga class that's open to the public. So last month I started offering one live class a month. It is digital, so it's through Zoom, which is wonderful because you could do it if you are, if you live out of Colorado, right? You don't have to be local to where I live in order to practice yoga with me. And we did the first one last month. It was so much fun. We carved out a little bit of time at the beginning to do kind of like a Bit From Within check-in, where I have a topic and we can, if you want to choose to share a bit from within for yourself, you can, and we can just kind of debrief and talk and connect with other humans who are like-minded, whether you know them or not. And then we can practice yoga for an hour, a gentle yoga practice. And this week's class is going to be on the 18th. This will be, there might be one more in the future that's totally free, just kind of open to anyone. And then come this fall, so probably in September, it'll be just for members of the Patreon that are part of that community tier level member. So if you've been thinking about hopping up to that level or joining the Patreon at all, definitely try to come out for this month's class or next month's class. This one's going to be on the 18th at 11 a.m. I am thrilled to be doing an 11 a.m. Sunday class because that used to be my slot at the yoga studio is 11 a.m. Sunday, and it just feels so sacred and special to me. So I'm so excited to be offering that class this week. Check it out. You can always check out the Patreon page or my A Bit From Within website for different material, classes, meditations, all of that. So all right, let's go ahead and see what the universe has to say to us through these cards. I've got my super attractor deck. This says, I let the universe catch up with my dreams. I love that. I'm trying to picture of like, do I need to let the universe catch up with my dream of a perfectly clean and organized house? Probably. I just need to be able to have some time to do that. I also can't help but think of, like my sister with her move, and how this is kind of like the universe conspiring to take her to this place. And I wonder how long she's dreamed of this moment. And that's the thing about dreams. Even as I think of my own dreams, sometimes a dream doesn't have to be a very clear vision that you can even express to somebody. Sometimes it's just a feeling that you're chasing in your heart, or just something that you know parts of, but not the whole thing. And I think that that's where the magic happens too, is if you can be clear about what the parts that then the universe can catch up with the rest. And I love that. I think that's such a beautiful one to pull right now at this first quarter moon week, and right at the beginning of this new moon kind of intention phase. So let the universe catch up with your dreams and keep taking care of yourself. And I will talk to you next time.